Okay, picture this. It's the end of the 19th century. The North Pole is one of the last great mysteries on the planet, a blank spot in the map, a place of legend and a place of death. And into this world steps a Norwegian explorer, Fridtjof Nansen, with a plan so completely out there, so against everything anyone knew, that the experts of the day basically called it a death wish. This was a plan born from a ghost ship, a theory built on clues from the dead. Let's dig into how Nansen planned to conquer the unconquerable.
So here's the big question, the one that stumped everybody. How do you beat the Arctic? I mean, every expedition before Nansen had tried the same thing. Brute force. Just smash your way through the ice with powerful ships. And you know what happened every single time? They failed. Ships were crushed into splinters. Crews vanished. The ice always won.
And this is where Nansen's idea was just so brilliant. A total 180. While everyone else saw the ice as the enemy, something to fight, he saw it as a tool. He proposed not fighting the ice, but surrendering to it. Don't steam through it, he said. Let's get stuck in it. His plan was to literally use the power that had destroyed everyone else and make it his engine.
But where did he get this crazy, brilliant idea? Well, it wasn't just a shot in the dark. Nansen's entire theory, the very foundation of this insane expedition, was built on clues left behind by a ghost ship.
Yeah, check this out. 3 years after an American ship, the Jeannette, was crushed by ice north of Siberia, pieces of it started washing up, all the way over in Greenland. And these weren't just random bits of wood. We're talking about specific, identifiable items, a provision list signed by the ship's commander, a list of the boats, even a pair of oilskin pants marked with a crewman's name.
To Nansen, this was the smoking gun. It was irrefutable proof of a powerful, undiscovered current flowing right across the top of the world, what he called the transpolar drift stream. His theory was simple. If he could just get a ship stuck in the ice near Siberia, that current would be like a giant conveyor belt, carrying him right over, or at least super close to, the North Pole itself.
You'd think the scientific world would be thrilled, right? Nope. They were horrified. The most respected polar authorities, guys like Admiral Sir George H. Richards of Britain's Royal Navy, they publicly blasted the plan. They said no ship could possibly survive being frozen solid in the polar ice. They were convinced Nansen was just leading his men to a slow, agonizing death.
Okay, so Nansen has this wild theory. But how do you actually build a ship that can survive millions of tons of ice trying to crush it into splinters? You can't just use a normal ship. You need something impossible. And this was the answer. The Fram. Just a revolutionary piece of engineering. First, her hull was completely rounded, like a saucer, with no sharp edges for the ice to get a grip on. The rudder and propeller, they could be pulled up inside the ship, safe and sound. The physics were just brilliant. When the ice squeezed from the sides, the curved hull would force the ship up, not in. It would just pop her out of the pressure like a watermelon seed squeezed between your fingers, to rest safely on top of the ice.
So, his theory was being mocked, but he had his purpose-built ship. Nansen sailed north. And then, he and his crew of 12 did the unthinkable. They sailed directly into the ice pack and just waited for the trap to spring shut. September 22nd, 1893. That's the day. The engines go silent. The ice closes in, locking the Fram in its grip. For better or for worse, they were now part of the drift. There was no going home, no turning back.
Can you even imagine the world they just entered? The profound silence, broken only by the terrifying groans and shrieks of ice grinding against the hull. Nansen wrote in his journal about a silence so total you could hear your own nerves vibrating. They were completely, utterly alone, adrift in a frozen, endless night. And they would stay prisoners of this silent world for over 800 days. Let that sink in. That's nearly 3 years. 3 long, dark winters, completely cut off from the rest of humanity, with no way of knowing if their gamble was working or if they were just drifting to their deaths. So how do you survive that without going crazy? You build a community. You create a purpose. They fought back against the psychological pressure with a super strict routine. They did meticulous scientific work, measuring the water depth, the temperature, the speed of the drift. All of it gave their days meaning. But they also took care of their spirits. They played cards, they had a band, they even published their own little newspaper and celebrated holidays like you wouldn't believe. Anything to keep the crushing darkness at bay.
For more than a year, the plan worked. It was actually working. The Fram survived the incredible pressure, and the drift carried them north just like Nansen predicted. But then, his careful measurements started to reveal a terrible truth. The drift wasn't going to take them directly over the pole.
The current was slowly but surely pulling them westward. They were going to miss it. For a guy like Nansen, coming this close just wasn't good enough. So he made a decision that was, you could argue, even crazier than his original plan. He would leave the safety of the Fram and try to get to the pole on foot. He picked one companion, the incredibly tough Hjalmar Johansen. The two of them would take dog sleds, enough supplies for 3 months, and a couple of kayaks, and just head out across hundreds of miles of chaotic, moving sea ice. Their only way back to civilization was to somehow, some way, reach the distant islands of Franz Josef Land, before the next winter trapped them forever.
What happened next was just one of the most grueling and desperate journeys in the history of exploration. The mission changed completely. It was no longer about getting to a place on a map.
They pushed farther north than any human had ever been. They set a new world record. But the ice was just impossible, constantly breaking up, piling into huge ridges. The pole was out of reach, so they turned south. And in that moment, the goal changed. It wasn't about glory anymore. It was just about staying alive. It would take them 15 months, a year and a quarter, just the two of them skiing and paddling across a frozen wasteland while the entire world assumed they were long dead.
They lived like prehistoric men. Seriously, when their food ran out, they survived only on what they could hunt. Their diet was polar bear and walrus meat, fried in blubber. And when things got truly desperate, they had to kill and eat their own sled dogs, one by one, until there were none left.
What on earth keeps a person going through that kind of hell? Nansen's own words give us a clue. He had this iron will, this belief that trying this wasn't just a choice, it was his duty. That profound sense of conviction is what pushed him through hardships that are almost impossible for us to even imagine today. So after a brutal winter, which they spent in a makeshift stone hut they built themselves, surviving on nothing but polar bear meat, Nansen and Johansen started their journey south again, just hoping for a miracle.
And incredibly, they got one. They were rescued by a British expedition. Just a few weeks later, the Fram itself sailed out of the ice, having completed its 3-year journey, the whole crew safe and sound. So no, they hadn't reached the geographical pole, but they did something so much bigger. They had unlocked the secrets of the Arctic Ocean and completely rewritten the rules for how to explore it. Nansen's story proves that sometimes the most revolutionary path isn't to fight the forces working against you, but to have the genius and the courage to actually understand them and join them. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What is it in the human spirit that drives us to these empty spaces, to the very edge of what's possible and beyond?